breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks.
Afternoon and a warm welcome welcome to you all. Thanks for being here. Welcome to those listening at home. Appreciate that you're listening at home or at the office, wherever you may be. Reminder for those here, if you could turn your mobile phones off so that it doesn't interfere with our recording. Please be seated. Thank you. So in opening the meeting, I have one apology. Councillor Dakin for today. Councillor Walker, I think, is coming. Declaration of interest. Any declaration of interest? No. Confirmation of the minutes. Somebody happy to move the minutes of the meeting here of the 7th of February? Councillor Soward moved and seconded Councillor Dawkins. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. There's no deputations and no petitions. Community reports. We're very fortunate today. We have two. And first of all, we have Miss Mandy Shepherd. I'm going by the order in the book, sorry, but no. Miss Mandy Shepherd, General Manager of Theatre North, and can I say congratulations on a great evening last night as well to recognise the great work of Greg. So, looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much. And I did bring some notes with me because I'm feeling a little weary after the subject of today's front page of the Examiner. As you just heard, it was the official farewell for our recently retired artistic director, Greg Miller. Now, those who paid tribute to him, including the Mayor, last night spoke of his engaging, energetic and colourful leadership style and the legacy which is a vibrant and energised Theatre North. That vibrancy and energy drove Theatre North to successfully implement some new approaches and strategies to branding and programming and marketing and fundraising over the past few years. And in recent years, our subscription season, and I have a little sample here, just in case you recognise the cover, and if you haven't had a chance to see that yet, I have brought some copies with me today for you later on. The subscription season has it's enlarged in the last few years to include a broader variety of shows and events, successfully engaging new audiences, and really importantly has expanded to include several projects and collaborations with local arts workers and business partners, which have directly facilitated opportunities for creative development and for career development here in Launceston. A couple of examples. Over 2 years, starting last year, we've been supporting a new company called Makeshift Dance. We supported the creative development of their new work last year. We supported their grant application to the Australia Council with a letter of recommendation. And now this year we're providing venue support and marketing the show through our subscription season. It's called Absence of Light. It's a stunning and relevant piece of new contemporary dance, created right here in Launceston in the Earl Arts Centre in August, and I do encourage you to go along and see it. Our wonderful Raw Young Talent on Stage program, which is now in its 4th year, in partnership with Festivali, which is giving a stage to emerging and aspiring young artists in Launceston. A series of cocktail hour poetry readings curated by Cameron Hindram is coming up later this year at the Hotel Grand Chancellor. And we're able to create and support these projects thanks to the financial and in-kind assistance of business partnerships and also to the fundraising efforts and, very importantly, the passion of our volunteers, our Friends of Theatre North, which is now in itself a thriving arts organisation. We're bringing some big shows to town as well, thanks to funding from the Tasmanian Government through Arts Tasmania. We've got Circus Oz, Possum Magic from Monkey Bar Theatre Company, a big stage musical on a national tour called The Sapphires, all coming to the Princess Theatre later this year as part of our program. And of course the invaluable support of the City of Launceston ensures our beautiful theatre is well resourced and well utilised by our local arts-loving community. Encore Theatre Company will be in residence very shortly for Strictly Ballroom from the 14th of March, promising to be a spectacular piece of community theatre. And of course the City of Launceston's new sound system installed last year will be getting a thorough workout during March during that show. Launceston competitions will be back this year, Launceston Festival of Dance, and the new exciting Australian Musical Theatre Festival, supported by Theatre North, supported by so many organisations, including the City of Launceston, will see fans from around Australia converging here in Launceston for a week of fantastic musical fun. Theatre North has an ambitious and exciting strategic vision for the next 10 years, which moves beyond audience development and professional venue management to one of increasing our significance in the lives of our artists, our companies, our audiences and our communities here in Northern Tasmania. We're looking forward to an exciting year of cultural events in Launceston.
being a part of as many of them as we possibly can, and continuing our role as caretakers of the Princess Theatre, and in building the cultural, economic and social vibrancy of Launceston by exciting audiences and engaging the community. And I do hope that we will see many of you at the Princess Theatre very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, and from myself, I know from all the councillors and our staff too, for that matter, we thank you for the way you look after the theatre and the programs that you bring to the city. It's absolutely fantastic, so congratulations and well done. And now we have Mr Malcolm Reid, Tamer Bicycle Users Group.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor, and thanks very much to everybody at Launceston City Council for the support you've given us for Bike Week 2019 this year. Given that, and I thought it was an opportune time to give all the council feedback on the organisations that we've managed to achieve so far and the events that we've got planned. So Bike Week will run between the 3rd and the 9th of March. This year, you may have seen this poster around. We have a wide range of community events, beginning with, I'll run through the lot, but I'll focus on two. Firstly, the community bike ride on Sunday the 3rd of March, leaving the Heritage Forest Churchill Park car park. There'll be two courses, one for kids and absolute beginners, which will be quite short, and one slightly longer, about 15 k's or so, round the trails. So it's a ride that's accessible for everybody. This week is about trying to promote the idea that cycling is for everybody. It's not just a small one segment market here. There's a wide range of people looking at taking up bike riding and doing so already. So it's also, there'll be a free barbecue afterwards. So I'd invite all of you along. If you've got a bike in the shed, here's your opportunity to get it out of the shed and shake the cobwebs out and come along to the community ride. As I said, there'll be this barbecue afterwards. We're thinking to have some colour and movement, as Norman Gunston used to say, with some clowns, and also we've invited the Heritage Bike constituency with the penny farthings, etc. as well, because they were keen to be involved in a longer ride than what was offered to them at the Junction Arts Festival. On Monday is a BMX workshop in Civic Square, so we're utilising that new space there. Hopefully get a lot of young people along as well. It's a well-known person, I'm told, Matt Wooten. You can find him on YouTube. He'll provide tricks and new skills for all those that come along. Also, on Tuesday night is the free bike maintenance workshop. So once you've got your bike out of the shed, you can come along to the bike maintenance workshops and remind yourself how to fix a puncture, if nothing else. But it's actually a lot more than that. It's actually helping you to look after your bikes a lot better. I'll just skim, because I want to come to this towards the end. There's a children's event out of the library story time on the Wednesday. Our film night, The Bikes of Roth, again, is an engaging, acclaimed, award-winning film. It's based on the novel by John Steinbeck, the Grapes of Roth, and it follows the route that those original people who were dispossessed from their land in the 1930s and the Great Depression took. And also a group of Australians decided to follow that route on a similar amount of money that the original people had, which was almost nothing. So you see the best and worst of the United States, contemporary United States society that they engage with along the way. It's a brilliant film. It's at the Star on Thursday night at 7 o'clock. You're all welcome to that. And our first probably really organised night ride tonight on the Friday night, which is March the 8th. So you can bring along your bikes, light them up, and try to put on a bit of a show around Launceston trails as well. We'll try to get some great photographs. We've had interest from photographers so that they'll be, photographs that maybe council themselves can use and show Launceston in a slightly different light. If I can just come back to the public forum, which I think is of crucial interest to most of you. It is Bike Week. This forum is not just about bikes. It's about strategies for building a more vibrant and prosperous CBD. Of course, we think, and the evidence shows this increasingly, that cities that are working are those based around the idea of allowing people to move more freely and more slowly around city centres, because then they tend to observe more, they tend to enjoy the experience more, they spend more. And that's good for business in this community. So I've got a support of City Prom for this event, and we've got a panel including Dr. Helen Norrie from the UTAS, Hugh Mackenzie from City Council, well, we all know Hugh. Helen will, of course, present evidence from other cities as to what's working in terms of making them more vibrant and people-centred. The third speaker, it is Bike Week, so Alison's going to talk about evidence we've collected about, what makes cities work as effectively as possible for, as I said, for people and for business. And finally, Steve Henty from City Prom will also make a presentation. So I'd urge you all to come to that. I have sent you all emails inviting you to all events. As I said, hopefully if we don't see you at the community ride, and you'll be well looked after if you do, we'll see you at the public forum, because it's a very important event for our future, I think. Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks again to Council for your direct financial support.
Thank you. Well done, Malcolm. Thank you very much for that report. And thank you for the work that you and the Bicycle Committee have done over many, many years. And it's been great to be involved with that and working with our committee, which I'm sure you've done that over quite a few years that I'm aware of. So thank you for your support. And look, and I noticed in the report, because one of the things that I've always wanted was a car-free day or half day in the city, which I've been talking about for some time now, and I've noticed it was in the minutes of the meeting, which is fantastic. So hopefully that can be achieved in the not too distant future. Then we'll see a lot more of it, I'm sure, once people see what it can do. Thank you, appreciate that. So it's public question time.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Brian Kahn, 2 Hoppers Bridge Road at Newstead. First of all, Mr Mayor, thank you for the courtesy that you and the council extended to me at the last meeting. And I'd like to mention that 2 things at Newstead over the last fortnight were the looking after the new development in Marion Court off Pinkwhite Road with all the golfs and everything there. Your staff have acted promptly and slashed all the golfs down, which was very much appreciated by the residents and the contractors. Secondly, the hole that was developed outside the the Commonwealth Bank out there was promptly fixed by the council, and which we very much appreciated. And when we the mafia meet at the coffee shop at Newstead, we turn around and receive a lot of complaints.
Thank you for that.
The main reason that I'm here today, Mr Mayor and councillors, is to turn around and over the information given to the Rail Corridor Committee. And I extrapolated some of the information that was given by Robert Raven at Bridestone Estate, which turned around and caused me some concern. And one that I noted was, Launceston City Council make a great deal of the sale of Launceston, etc. It concludes, this is such an easy selling issue, it makes me cross at times. Launceston Council has not picked up and run with it. That is Launceston, and I endorse it. Now, I know at the last meeting you've offered to meet with Mr Raven, and I understand he may be back from overseas at the moment, but I think that needs to be clarified with Mr Raven. He also stated there, demographic happening with Asian visitors. They're moving from plain maids to families, and very, very important shift is taking place. Families coupled between numbers 2 and maybe 12 are increasing, becoming the face of tourism from an Asian background, and face of tourism from the rest of the world are experience seekers, cashed up couples from anywhere. There is not a single visit to the Bridestone Estate from Asia has any whatsoever in riding a bike. But these are questions you can take up with him. Mr Raven stated also, my third question, he was on tour as a Northern Tasmanian board for 3 years. And in that time the board was seeking an overreaching theme for Northern Tasmania. To this day he believes they have not found it. There is not one single rubbing point that has made all the groups of Northern Tasmania reporting to tourism in Northern Tasmania. Not one unifying signal has been found. Heritage Rail is the first and only smart idea I have seen in 4 years on the board and 12 years in Tasmania that has the potential to bring communities together and take tourism to a different location. So it's important, I think, that as you already offered, Mr Mayor, to talk to Mr Raven, and because with 18,000 tourists going through Bridestone in December and a massive 35,000 going through in January, and any of us that realise, like I have a holiday home in the northeast, that Scottsdale does not have the facilities.
Yeah, thank you. It's not time for speeches now, but I appreciate that and appreciate the questions, and the answer is very similar to last week. We'll follow up with a meeting and we'll see what develops out of that meeting. Thank you. Any other questions from the public? Thank you. There's no, where are we up to? There isn't any planning items.
Just wondering whether I can just test the lead as to whether the item 20.1
Yep.
forward as speaking.
Yep. Seconder from Councillor Finlay. So we'll move that. All those in favour? That is carried. So we're on to 20.1. Someone happy to... Oh, we've got a speaker. We'll do the speaker first. I'm sorry. So Mr Lyndon Green.
So, Mayor Van Zetten and councillors, thank you for the opportunity to put forward our request to have a representative on our committee and for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to briefly just overview what we're asking for. The Communities for Children program is an Australian Department of Social Services funded program which delivers Communities for Children's programs within the Launceston and West Tamar footprint area. This program is an early intervention program for vulnerable children and families with children in the age group of 0 to 12. We have very strict targets about utilising evidence-based programs and actively support the provision of services that will improve outcomes for children and families within this district. We establish and maintain 6 local committees which assist to plan and guide and support the activity. Committees are representative and include clients, parents, caregivers, local businesses and local service providers. Now, our community council, which is we've asked for a representative from this council to be a part of, is what oversees these 6 representative committees and advises Anglicare. It assists Anglicare in developing, monitoring and reviewing a community strategic plan and activity work plan. It appoints a funding panel to assist in assessing applications for funding. It draws upon and contributes to the evidence of good practice in early childhood. It represents the Launceston and Tamar Valley communities. It supports collaboration across all levels of government and promotes and advocates for the program within the community. It informs the project regarding relevant issues and identifying gaps in service. We ask for a representative of all of the councils within our footprint to be part of our community council so that we can be better informed about what the needs are from a different perspective than we get ourselves. The last thing I wanted to speak about is the Every Child Succeeds report, which I have handed over to council officers in order to distribute to you. This report was first conducted in 2014 and was originally called the State of Launceston Children's Report. As the City of Launceston was part of the creation of the original report, it is therefore appropriate, we believe, to also provide this updated report to the Council. This report brings together available data on indicators of wellbeing for children in Launceston and the surrounding areas. It continues to provide a valuable benchmark for the wellbeing of children living in the Launceston district. And we're very pleased to be able to provide this report in both hard copy and also on USB to the Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So we have the item 20.1. Somebody happy to move a motion with a name in it would be good. So it's, sorry, got Councillor Spencer. Move. Seconded Councillor McKenzie. Have you got a name? An offer? I think Councillor Dawkins is happy to go. So you happy to put that in there, Councillor Spencer and Councillor McKenzie? So it'll become with the name of the representative, not to be a councillor, it is a specific name, Councillor Dawkins, be nominated. Unless there's anybody else that's really keen for that. Councillor Spencer, do you wish to speak? Councillor McKenzie.
Well, Mr Mayor, only because I think we've actually had interaction with this group, maybe not quite by that name. I think it was certainly in the past with Anglicare, I think, a few years ago, and I think we've definitely, as Director Hurst has mentioned, have had some involvement through officer level, but I don't think at that time we actually had anyone from an aldermanic or councillor responsibility in there, and I think this is a logical extension. I think the children of our city are a very important asset to us going forward, and I think that being part of something like this is a great idea for the community.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Dawkins.
I was delighted to be approached and to consider this position. I think that every single person in this community would only want for every child to succeed. We do live in a very disadvantaged community. We have so much wealth, natural abundant wealth. On the other hand, we have people who never, ever, ever get to reach outside of their communities and to lift themselves out of poverty. So I am delighted if I'm selected to be on this committee, and I will do my very best to ensure that every single child in this community has that opportunity.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dawkins. Question from Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. An opportune time to check on the status of our working towards becoming a child-friendly city. We did quite a lot of work on that a number of years ago. Certainly, Alderman Ball was instrumental in some of that work. I just wonder where we're at with that. Obviously, we're doing some great things in community development and in youth development, and it's probably advancing as part of that, but just wondering where we are with that.
Thank you, Deputy. Director Hurst.
Thanks, Mayor, and I may actually need to take that on notice, but my recollection was that we had been working with the Communities for Children committee, and that what was decided at that time was that the State of Launceston's Children, or Every Child Succeeds report, should be the first focus, and to build upon that. But I'm too far removed from recent experience with it to know whether that's still on the agenda to continue. So happy to come back with that information after we've had a chance to liaise with the Communities for Children people.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Spencer, you wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. Thank you. So we go back to Mayor's announcements. Just a few that I do want to mention, and in particular, it was a pleasure to go down to the Launceston Henley Regatta last weekend, and look, for a small committee, do an amazing job to keep rowing on the Tamar River, and I think we should be supporting that, and we are. And the reason I do want to say something is that to you, General Manager, and to our staff to pass on from the committee, the thanks very much for the support they gave to the event. And thanks very much for the funds that we give, but also for the support with the facilities on the day. And it was well run. It was a great event, and it's great to see people by the Tamar River watching rowing locally right here rather than having to go out of the city. But pity the weather was a bit windy on the Sunday morning, and it was very strong wind and it got very blowy, but we can't do a lot about that. So that was pleasing. And just to mention that I've had a number of comments, and I'm sure other councillors have, about TSO and their tickets. For those that have contacted me, that I've been encouraging them to go, and today's a good day to go online, because there are people who are handing them back who got 10 and don't use them now, and there are now a few more tickets on there. So if you know of anybody, pass that on, because I've had 4 people that have approached me and they've got tickets today, so they're very happy, they're excited. So there may be others that might want to hear that and know that, but we're looking forward to the TSO concert this Saturday night, I think we got, this Saturday night. That's it from myself. Councillor reports. Councillor Sauer.
Thanks, Mayor. Just briefly to share with councillors, when I mentioned the phrase Headstone project, I know that existing from the previous councillors would be aware of that, new councillors may not, but it was a privilege on this week to be at Carvilla with the Governor-General on site as part of the work that the Headstone project are doing. For the benefit of new councillors, it grew out of a group of volunteers led by Ms Andrea Gerard AM, where they started by identifying unmarked graves of returned service people from World War I, people who came back from the war or fell into perhaps poverty or what we'd call today PTSD, buried in unmarked graves where people weren't aware of who was in that particular plot. They did some research, approached council. They've done a very similar thing at Cornelian Bay. And Mr Mayor, I just wanted to do a couple of things. First of all, on behalf of feedback given to me whilst there, to pass on to council the support and thanks that the Headstone people have, particularly for Ralph out there at Carvilla and his team. But secondly, it might also be worthwhile extending an invitation to that group at some stage to give an update to council, because they're very diligent. I think they started off, with 13 or 15 that they identified. I think they're up into the hundreds now. So they're a very diligent group, and it'd be great for new councillors particularly to get across that project. Volunteer people giving up their time to pay respects to those who served our country. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Soward. Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you, Mayor. I was delighted to be on the panel for the City of Launceston University Scholarship, and I would like to announce that Camille Sharmi, she already knows that she was the worthy recipient, incredible group of young people who were put forward for this. Really, our community is in great hands if this is any indication of the future. Millie would like to go on and study an arts degree, but she's also got an entrepreneurial flair, which was really exciting. But I did ask every recipient, or every person that was put forward, just to talk about their engagement with the City of Launceston and where they thought we could do better in that youth space. And they all said the same thing. They want to see more regular events, just like the ones that we had in the Lane Way quadrant, but they want to see them more regularly, a place that they can know that every Friday there's going to be something happening from 6 to 8 o'clock. And I think we did start on that path, but we didn't really continue with it once we'd had a couple that perhaps didn't work as well. So from the young people, from the scholarships, I'd just like to put forward, could we please consider some more regular events that young people can be a part of?
Thank you. Councillor Dawkins. Any other councillor? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors will be aware that in the recent past, volunteers that operated out of the Gorge Cottage Gorge Volunteers Group have made their resignation en masse, and I have spoken with them as well as speaking with the General Manager, and I'm also speaking with Officer Barry Pickett just in regards to that to get some background information. I'd just like to, reiterate to councillors that, as I'm sure everyone would agree, that volunteers are an important part of our community. That this is obviously not an ideal situation for whatever reason that it's occurred. I'm not privy to at the moment, but that I would encourage the council and councillors to endeavour to find a new way forward for a volunteer group for such an important area in our community. I know we have a very successful small group up in Trevellyn Reserve, the Friends of Trevellyn Reserve, that seem to operate and are very active in contributing to the management of that area. So, yeah, just for councillors to bear in mind that I'd certainly be keen to help pursue a new model, if that was appropriate, for volunteers in the Gorge. Thank you.
Any other councillor reports? Councillor Mackenzie.
Just volunteers made me think of something else, Councillor Walker, so thank you for that. But I was approached during the week in relation to an issue emerging up at the St Leonard's Athletic Centre, where I believe the board are now preventing children from under the age of 10 to actually train on the track. I've passed this on to one of our officers for them to investigate, which they're currently doing, so it's not here for other than action is been happening, but I just think it's a bit disturbing that our track's sort of being limited for the use of young people in relation to, and particularly the way it appears to have been done. So just noting that that's there, and I just thought from a public record point of view to put it out that we as council are actually doing something actively to review it.
Yep, thank you. As I've just been informed, it is being followed up.
Yep.
So. Any other comments or reports from councillors? Any questions from council? Oh, questions? Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you, Mayor. Given the success of the new pedestrian bridge in attracting an unprecedented number of pedestrians and cyclists onto the river bend and surrounding trails via Build It and They Will Come kind of approach, and also given the now very solid evidence from around the world and in Australia of the incredible long-term health, social and psychological benefits that regular cycling and walking can bring, particularly in the area of cancer, heart disease and diabetes. Can the GM provide an update on the plans for completing the missing link behind Mowbray Racecourse in the Inveresk-Rochely Trail, a project which has been talked about for many years, and when completed, would a safe and accessible community resource that could have enormous social and health benefits for the northern suburbs and indeed the whole community?
I'll take it on notice to come back in specific detail, but certainly those links are included in the Greater Launceston Plan with respect to the overarching recreational trails network that obviously is proposed, for the Greater Launceston area into the future. But I can certainly look into those specific areas you're talking about and come back to you.
Councillor Mackenzie wishes to comment.
Yeah, I might be able just to add something to the comments made by Councillor Dawkins. The Pedestrian and Bike Committee actually have been reviewing a number of missing links in relation to our chain, and one of those is the one around the Mowbray racetrack. Myself and and Malcolm Cohen, together with Roger Faulkner, went out and actually walked the area a couple of weeks ago, and we think we found an area where we can actually find our way through. So there's actually been some drawings, and again, it's got to go back through council to review as to whether the affordability and the timing of it. But there are also some missing links up around Faulkner Park, where we come off the back end of the levee, which we also did an investigatory walk a couple of weeks ago, and we think we may have found a way through there as well to try and link some things together. So the Pedestrian Bike Committee are actually actively working on trying to find answers to those missing links, because we've been, I think the Inverest Rachel Lee Rail Trail has been on our agenda for probably 4 years or more, probably 7 actually. When I think about it, I think Jeremy was involved in it in the time back. So it's there, and that has caused us some angst in completing it. But we believe we've now found a trail around it. We've now just got to work out how to afford to do it.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. Did a job for a guy this morning, and he was saying he doesn't come to the centre of town anymore because of the parking. I'm just wondering how we're going with the hour-and-a-half free parking. The quadrant in St John Street's got 12 empty shops. We've got to do something.
Thank you. General Manager, wish to...
On the latter part of the question, I'll say that we've been following the trend with respect to vacant buildings with Launceston for the last 5 years. In actual fact, the vacancy rate is the lowest it's been in Launceston over the last 5 years. But in respect to where we're at on the 90-minute trial, I know that Bruce has got an answer to that question, and I'll ask him to give it to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. With response to the request to work's being completed by officers at the moment in response to Council's notice of motion for the provision of free parking for the first 60 to 90 minutes in our multi-deck car parks. It's intended it will be brought before Council for consideration in April, and obviously it's focused on parking within the central city and its relationship to retail trade and customer experiences.
Thanks.
Any further questions?
Thank you.
Committee reports, Pedestrian and Bike Committee. Moved by Councillor McKenzie, seconded by Councillor Cox. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor McKenzie?
I do actually raise an issue in regards to what's in that report, Mr Mayor, in relation to a walkable city. Got to put that on. Walkable city initiative that we're putting forward. Fundamentally, we believe there's an opportunity to do it. We've got a couple of event-related activities that are going on around the time we're considering doing it, but we still have some discussions to have with interested parties that before we actually announce what and when we're going to do it. So we actually need to get a few stakeholders together before we make announcements, and then them come back and tell us you didn't talk to us. So we'd like to talk to them first, but it's certainly an initiative that is endorsed by the Pedestrian and Bike Committee, and I think that ultimately the city will endorse it as well in relation to what I think potential benefits would be to the city.
Thank you. Councillor Cox. Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. We go on to 12.2, the Northern Youth, moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor McKenzie. Do you wish to speak to it, Deputy?
Thank you, Mayor. Based on one of the contributions earlier, I think it's important to note that the City of Launceston, together with the Northern Youth Coordinating Committee and our own YAG, are working collaboratively together with other members of the youth sector to present an outstanding youth event as part of National Youth Week. It's going to be in Tatler's Arcade, and it's going to be on Thursday the 11th of April, and it's going to take the form of a busking competition. As we know, Tatler's Arcade is an area that we are always looking to improve perception around, and what better way to do that than in Youth Week with a collaborative, safe, wonderful event that showcases the positivity and abilities of young people. Under the leadership of Youth Development Officer Claudia, who's with us today, I look forward to all councillors putting that date in their diary and celebrating young people, celebrating a youth event and celebrating National Youth Week at that initiative.
Thank you, Deputy. Councillor McKenzie.
Looks like I'm already still turned on. No, I'm not. Yes, I just would endorse that, and I just thought, just reading the report, I haven't been to my first committee meeting as yet, and I'm really quite excited by what I see in the report so far. So they've jumped out of the blocks very quickly this year, so fantastic.
Any other councillors wish to speak? Do you wish to close, Deputy? No? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and that is all councillors present. That is carried. Move on to 13.1, workshops. I see it's a motion now. So moved by Councillor Mackenzie, seconded by Councillor Stosnicek. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie?
I just want to endorse the comments I think Councillor Gibson made last month. It was somebody else, I apologise, but just in relation to the extra information in there about the workshops, I think it's something of great value to the community. Sorry, Councillor Finlay. I think it's actually just really good and helpful for the community to know what we're actually talking about in those weeks. We're not in here. Good
initiative. Thank you. Councillor Stosnicek, anyone else wish to comment? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. Move on to 15.1, Launceston Heritage Advisory Committee nomination. Moved, Councillor Mackenzie. Seconded, Councillor Cox. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie?
I think we've got three worthy applicants that have put their hands up to join the Launceston Heritage Advisory Committee, and we'd be delighted for them to be appointed today.
Councillor Cox. Thank you. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Walker.
Oh, just as a new member on that committee, I look forward to actually working with all councillors on any issues heritage, and I look forward to the guidance of the old hand on the committee, Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie, you wish to close? Thought you might have a response, but anyway, I'll put the motion. Those in favour. That's all councillors present. Thank you. That is carried. We move on to 18.1. Mackenzie?
I will, and I'd really just like to congratulate the council on its speedy response to this, because it was only raised at last council, and I think that's terrific that we can turn something as important as this around as quickly as we have done. I'm a regular road user on that particular road, and I know Councillor Dawkins is as well, probably more frequently than me at the moment, but it is a road that I understand the nature of it. Initially when I read it I thought, well, that's a bit long, but then when I thought about it, there are a number of substantive areas through that road which do require a lower speed limit, and you actually can't even go 80 kilometres an hour in a number of those places. So in my view, I think looking through it on balance, it's actually not that long a period of time and a longer stretch of road. And I actually was quite impressed by the police officer's report and the depth that he went into in relation to his report on it. And again, really emphasising how fast we try to go to get somewhere not much sooner than we would if we went at another speed. So to drop 20 kilometres off and lose a minute of your time in driving just makes so much more poignant, I think, the issue that's being raised here. The particular area where the fatality took place in December is a particularly bad piece of road off Canberra, and throws it into somebody's gateway every time, and I think there's been a couple of accidents there, so I think it's not before time that an action is taken in relation to this, and I guess that the key thing now is, if we vote in favour of this today, the speedy sending of our report to State Growth to ask them to change the road speeds.
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
I just endorse everything that was just said there. It's something that needs to be done. It's a good move. The only thing I want to make is the social impact. Road accidents have a significant social impact. There's no such thing as an accident. They're crashes.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thanks. I was a little concerned when I saw this motion, because I'm looking in Google, it's 10 kilometres between Lilydale and Nobrina. So this morning I went and drove the road myself to actually look at it firsthand, because while I've been there a few times on a push bike, it's a bit different at a car at 100 kilometres an hour. The interesting part was I was unable to drive at 100 kilometres an hour, mainly because of the existing traffic doing it about 80 kilometres an hour. So I think we already have a self-imposed speed limit on that. My intention was to come one direction or the other at 100, but I was unable to do so. And it probably is unsafe to do so. So I can only back up what the other speakers have said about this change. And It isn't as long as it might think. When you look at the map, there is already a long lead out of Lilydale before you get to the zone that you change, and similarly coming into Labrina you have a long lead out as well before you actually get to the township of Labrina. I guess what it did emphasise to me is the need to have perhaps a funding of a passing lane up the Finger Post Hill. That was more of a concern and probably another likely accident spot, but we'll tackle this one as it is, and I think making it 80 kilometres an hour is actually a logical and sensible thing, and so I endorse what you've said.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Mayor. It's probably a little known fact that I'm actually a member of the Golconda Cricket Club, and so I actually do drive that road quite regularly in summer as well, and I endorse the comments from Councillor Harris in terms of that reduction of speed limit. My observation is that, of course, there's a lot of, a huge amount of people on that road are locals. I tend to rarely get to 100 kilometres an hour in most of those sections anyway, especially if it's at night time, animals and all that sort of thing. I'm probably driving at 80 kilometres an hour anyway. My point is that, yes, because of the 100 kilometre an hour zone and a lot of people who don't drive at that speed, there is a lot of people who will know the road well and will take opportunities to overtake in dangerous places. I've seen it way too many times, so I fully endorse the speed reduction and the ongoing sort of monitoring of that situation by the council. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mayor, and I'm sure that when Councillor Walker's bowling, he actually breaks the 100-kilometre barrier regularly. I'm sure of that. I just wanted to focus on one point and expand a little. Councillor Mackenzie, I should say, in his remarks, talked about this mindset that, for what we're doing, we're actually adding, maybe a minute or 2 minutes to someone's journey. And I think that needs to be a message that we really push back when people want to argue the toss with us about it. I remember, for the benefit of new councillors, when we dealt with the speed limit change around the food vans up on High Street, I do remember when social media went into a meltdown that the world was going to end, that we added 15 seconds onto people's journey through that length of High Street. And I think that, sometimes you've got to make that point that by what we're doing, we're being astute, we're being sensible, we're making good decisions. And if that means we add 60 seconds or 120 seconds onto someone's journey, well, so be it. But I really think that we need to make more of that. It does sound obvious, but sometimes obvious things aren't things that we make a point of, I think. So I think it's a great idea.
Thank you, Councillor Soward. Councillor Dawkins?
Yep. Obviously, I am on that road most days, and I do observe some behaviours that are absolutely and utterly terrifying. It's not just the speed that people are going, it's the soft edges of the roads as well that are causing a lot of problems. I see people wavering over the white line and then back into the soft spaces so often. So I know we've talked about education processes for people who are visiting the island who might not be used to driving on roads like that in the past. I still think there's a space here for that. Clearly, reducing the speed limit is an excellent idea, and I absolutely endorse it. I also endorse it for the amount of wildlife that are killed on our roads. When I drove out to Lilydale on, I think it was Wednesday, that I counted 7 fresh corpses just before Lilydale in this very small stretch of road. So clearly driving more slowly is going to help people avoid killing animals, but also there's an incredible opportunity in those wildlife hotspots where it's clear there's priority habitat for animals that we could be doing something to reduce the amount of wildlife kill on our roads. So yes, reducing the speed limit is one aspect, but there's still a lot more to be done to make this a safe road for not only people but for animals too.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie? Wish to close?
Yeah, I will, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for all the comments made, because I think they're all extremely valid and I think a very good project. I think the important thing that we don't lose sight of as well, the road still has dangers associated with the soft edges and things like that, and we don't use this as an excuse not to do our regular maintenance and actually review the road, how it needs to be actually rebuilt and retooled over time. So as long as our capital works program still assesses the road for what it needs to be, what needs to be done to it as well, I think that's a great outcome.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 19.1, progress against the annual plan. Somebody happy to move that? Councillor Harris, is there a seconder? Councillor Finlay. Just going to ask the General Manager to give a bit of a summary where we're at.
Thanks, Mayor. And yeah, thank you, Council, for giving me an opportunity to talk to the annual plan progress. It's not often that we actually get a chance to actually elaborate, I guess, on what we've got in the written report. So again, thanks for that. For me, what I would start off by saying, this is an exceptionally busy council, and probably one of the shortcomings of the annual plan is that it doesn't actually reflect the day-to-day, or doesn't include the day-to-day function that we perform as a council, which is done, I guess, in association with these big ticket annual plan items that we report against each year. And things like the fact that we've got the record number of DAs this year that we've assessed, as a planning department, and, all of the inspections and the inspectorial work we do, the events that we assess, are not part of what we actually report against, but they need to be taken into account in terms of the overall performance of the council, which is why I think it's great that we're moving to a 4-year delivery plan, which will actually include, I guess, the day-to-day actions of the council, in addition to this annual plan work that we report to you on each month. But in terms of how we're going, we are going quite well in respect of the projects that are on our plates. So the Greater Launceston, the GLTP, so the Greater Launceston Transformation Project is our Smart Cities initiative. That project has delivered 3D models now to enhance our own existing model, and has provided models to our neighbouring councils in Georgetown, Meander Valley Council and the West Tamar Council, which we are now using obviously in our town planning, and they're able to use now in terms of their town planning and decision making, which has been an excellent innovation. The innovation framework, which is a large part of the GLTP project, is largely certainly in its draft form, and will be completed in the near future, which will then drive an innovation framework that will allow for an innovation ecosystem to develop and evolve in Launceston. And we're just waiting on the provision of Telstra data around the people metrics, so that we're actually able to understand what that technological capability will deliver for us in the future, around understanding how our assets are being used by the community, and so we'll have more to say on that before the end of the financial year. Macquarie House, I was fortunate to undertake an inspection of Macquarie House earlier this week, and I have to say that the character, when you walk through Macquarie House, is maintained, and it's going to be a brilliant experience in terms of the way that building transforms to be, an innovation space, a restaurant space, just a nice space. So it's on track in respect of both budget and time frame, so a May completion. And again, from what I saw earlier this week, there's nothing to doubt that that's what's going to happen. The cultural strategy is another that is bubbling away behind the scenes. The public engagement has been completed and is currently the feedback from that work is being considered and integrated into the draft cultural strategy. We had a meeting of the project control group earlier this week, was it? I think last week. Oh my gosh. And the group has asked that we provide a comprehensive report to the next council meeting, which provides an update and also a direction in terms of where we're going on the cultural strategy. We are now meeting with UTAS around integrating their cultural work with our own in a meeting tomorrow. So that's progressing well. The reimagining of the gorge. Obviously, there's a report in the papers around the work that we're doing around the path work, the lighting, and the general maintenance work. But I think the playground work should be noted in respect of the significant, I guess, contribution that we're making to the gorge with that playground in the new location, and that's obviously due for completion prior to the Australian Tourism Awards on Friday week. Riverbend Park. So those will have noticed that the Skywalk feature play elements are starting to be installed on the site, and we're now working towards the completion date of 15th of April. A couple of the councillors will be, I told you so, in respect of the 3-week delay in terms of what we had been saying in terms of completion, but 15th of April. I could see some nodding going on as well. So 15th of April is what we're working to in terms of completing that. The St John Street bus stops issue is progressing well behind the scenes. We're undertaking detailed planning work and certainly hope to have something we can announce to the Launceston community in the near future around our plans for addressing that significant issue. The parking strategy has already been spoken about today. What wasn't spoken about is obviously the fact that our officers are deep in work gathering the evidence to be able to provide to Council to consider as part of both the 90-minute free trial but also the overall parking strategy. So they met with Hobart City Council staff last week, and I know they've met with Melbourne City Council staff in the recent weeks to understand what's happening with contemporary parking strategies around Australia. So again, we're expecting a high quality parking strategy to come before Council in the near future. Tamar River Health Action Plan is progressing with us providing a supporting and assisting role and guiding role for Taswater, who are obviously doing the substantive amount of the work in respect of the infrastructure upgrades that are largely exclusively on their infrastructure. We're also working with our neighbouring councils and the Department of State Growth around developing a transport vision for Greater Launceston, which will precede the broader transportation strategy that we've included or deferred to next year, in lieu of completing this work with all of the councils to understand where our priorities are and where our work needs to be focused on our transport network in the near future. The planning scheme is progressing really well. It's a significant body of work. We are including within that work now a significant amount of attention on our residential growth areas because obviously Launceston is drawing to the end of its residential, its residential supply of land, its residential stock of land, and so we do need to put our focus on that next expansion areas for Launceston. So a large part of the planning scheme work is looking at that. We do intend to undertake a community engagement process around our planning scheme, our draft local provisions in and around May or after May this year. Our view is that we want to deliver as close to a completed final product to the Tasmanian Planning Commission when we send it down, so that their work is streamlined in terms of obviously the statutory engagement work that they need to do. Similarly, the Relbia Area Development Plan is progressing, and that's looking at opportunities, for densifying areas of Relbia where there's potential for greater residential development to occur in those areas. The Population Task Force work we have been completing in association with NTDC on the Regional Economic Development Plan. What's been identified is that certainly as a region we need to focus more strongly around attracting people to Launceston, to the north, and there's a series of strategies that are being developed to look at delivering that. The UTAS redevelopment is progressing with the working group between council and the university having been established, and we've had one meeting in that group with a second meeting to occur tomorrow, and we're working on a fortnightly meeting schedule to bring that to council, to bring the master plan to council in as timely a manner as we possibly can. Certainly UTAS are working towards their commitment of starting the on-the-ground works this year, and we would expect to see the planning scheme amendments and the DAs submitted certainly this half of the new year, of this year. We've completed a framework for the review of the Greater Launceston Plan, which will occur in the next financial year. And we've received really positive reception from each of the GMs from the areas and indications to me that they've each included funding in their budgets for next year to contribute to that Greater Launceston Plan review. So I'm pleased that it's not just a City of Launceston funded review process, it will be all Greater Launceston Plan Council's funded project. We delivered the end of term report on the conclusion of the last council, and I think it bears noting that that was I think a really important ingredient to introduce into our local government governance arrangement. I think in terms of being able to have that transition from one council to the next, it's provided a pretty valuable tool, which I'm sure other councils will follow in the future. And just to close, internally, we've been focusing strongly on our culture. A cultural development program has been running across this organisation for the past 12 or 14 months, which is having significant, influence in terms of the way that we deliver our services, and we're focusing really strongly on how we deliver our services, looking at lean processes and identifying waste in our processes and trying to provide more efficiencies and effectiveness in what we do. The corporate strategic plan is now in a draft form and through consultation process and about to come back to council, along with the 4-year delivery plan I alluded to is in draft form, about to come back to council following our strategic workshop next week. And the backbone of all of that is the strategic asset management plan and the long-term finance plan, which over the course of the last 12 months we've produced robust documents that will chart us a positive way forward in respect of how we manage our assets and more particularly how we manage our finance for this council in a sustainable way into the future. So, Mayor, that's my update.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Harris, do you wish to speak to the item?
I will, and I say thank you to the General Manager for a comprehensive summary. I do have some questions. I don't know if it's appropriate to ask while I'm at this point or perhaps after.
After you've finished.
Yep, no, that's fine. So I do thank you for that, and I really do look forward to seeing some of these things coming to fruition. Some things seem to be going on for a very long time, and it is good that we seem to be making progress, and particularly the UTAS telling us that it's going to be half one of this year will be great news for anyone who's perhaps had doubts on that project. So with that, I'll sit down and ask some questions.
You can ask questions now. You may start.
No, ask them now, righto. Just a couple on the parking. When you said that you would have a report by April to us, what history or evidence are you going to base that on as far as Launceston is concerned as to the success or otherwise of the provision of free parking?
General Manager.
Thanks. So, look, obviously there's a literature review and an analysis of what's happening in other areas where they've had 90-minute free parking introduced. Hobart's the closest example with respect to distance. We've had trials previously in Launceston and obviously we'll draw the findings from those into the evidence base. But largely the evidence will be presented and workshopped with the council to make a decision on whether we wish to invest in a new trial. Obviously, to do a trial is a significant undertaking, and obviously we would want direction from the council on whether it wishes to do that, and that should be based on the evidence that we provide. So look, we are endeavouring to provide the absolutely robustest evidence that we can to allow you guys to make a decision on that, and it will be around that time.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any other questions?
No, not.
Councillor Finlay, seconder.
Thanks, Mayor. And as Councillor Harris has focused on some of the content and some questions around what's in the report, can I acknowledge that it's great to have a verbal update, and I think hearing feedback and taking on suggestions on how to do that is really important. Often over the history of council this item will come up, one of the two of us might comment on a little bit of it, but it sort of gets washed and then moves on. It's a really critical part of what we do, and I think as an organisation we're working together and learning and growing together, and more so now than ever in the past. As a group of councillors, as a group of executive, but also the organisation and the teams, the input into this and what this actually tells us about how we're doing is really important. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank you for that.
Thank you. Question, Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, my questions are related to what we see in the attachments. On page 4, with regard to the cultural strategy, it says, and this might come out in fortnight from today's report, it says a regular newsletter was established for stakeholders in late 2018 which features regular updates on the strategy. I just wonder, in terms of transparency, I'm not sure if one edition of the newsletter is regular. Should we reword that in terms of transparency? And my other question with regard to the item of the mall, page 6, I'm wondering if the final point to get us to 100 obviously may include the clock which we're waiting to go back, but does that also include the children's play equipment in terms of the musical instruments which were always part of the design, always part of the council endorsed plans? Or was that one point simply the activation? What is that one point? Is it those three things together or something else?
General Manager.
I think the safest thing for me to do on that one is for the latter is I'm going to have to take that one on notice, Councillor, and come back to you on that. In respect to the cultural strategy, yeah, I accept that it was intended that would be a more regular newsletter than what has transpired, so we can certainly reword that, but it is intended that we do have a more regular and engaging, feedback mechanism as part of that project, so we can see to that.
Question, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Deputy Mayor's mention of the clock reminded me that, and correct me if I'm wrong, General Manager, but are there no flags in our mall at present? A Launceston flag, a Australian flag and an Aboriginal flag?
I think they're still there, aren't they? I have to check. But
I don't believe that they are.
Oh, okay. We'll follow
and so that might
they should be on the end of this.
They should be.
Yeah.
Maybe they are. So I say, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, we'll take it on notice.
We'll
go for a walk.
We'll put it in there with the clock. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, General Manager, for your very comprehensive report. I think there's just a couple of things I want to take out of all of that. And I did make a similar remark, General Manager, at our annual general meeting when you took us through a PowerPoint presentation with a lot of images. It's very easy in our role as councillors to do the day-to-day stuff that we do and chase up the issues we chase up and on the committees we work on and all the things that we do. But sometimes while we're doing that, it's actually quite easy to forget all of the things that are going on in this city. And you took us through some stuff there that is some very, very big, game-changing, at times the word generational changing, things are happening. And I think obviously, while we need to keep our eye on the day-to-day, the important work all of us do in helping constituents and working on the committees we work on, it's also really important to see the change that is happening in this city. And I'm sure that all of us in our roles, Mr Mayor, talk to people who go away and then come back and they go, wow, there's all these really positive things that are happening. So I think too, and I know that Mr Tennant and his team in the media area do a very, very good job of getting that message out there. I see we don't have anyone from the Examiner here today, which is a shame, but I think with a glass half full type approach, it'd be great if some of this information is told in other forums, so that message not just is heard from council, but from others about the great things, the big things that are happening in our city. And a big thanks to everyone involved, obviously, through you, General Manager, on the operational side of things, to making all these great things happen.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mayor. While there has been some comment about the mall, I was called by a member of the public in regards to public place asbestos with all of the works that have gone on in the mall. Hanging down from some of the awnings is asbestos marked. Someone's actually removed some, but whether we can do a check, it's particular to do with the former Birchall's property in the underline there, whether obviously a property owner responsibility, but if it's in that public place, what our responsibility is to that. If maybe we could have someone have a check of that. It just reminded me. Sorry.
Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. Just want to follow up with the manager about Mr Ridgely's problems up at Leonard's. He's bothered me 3 or 4 times. He's been on to...
Not related to this.
Right, just want to know if what we can...
No, that should have been in general.
Oh, right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A couple of comments and then a question. Again, I endorse, I think it's terrific, this extra news, and I think that given we do these reports every so often, I think a verbal report to it, I think at council meetings, I think is worthwhile, I think as demonstrated by your report today. I think just taking on board a couple of comments made by other people is we forget how busy a council we actually are, and we sometimes look at these things and get a little bit disappointed we aren't quite where we think we should be. But I'd just like to acknowledge the fact that the council is working extremely hard. We're probably in one of the busiest times of the council's life, I think, and just acknowledging to all the hard work that's done by the General Manager's Directorate and the staff of the Launceston City Council in what they do. It's very easy to find out the things that they don't do because everybody's very quick at pointing those things out. But so I just acknowledge that, and I think today was worthwhile, and I take on board the comments made by Councillor Soward there that I think some of the gems out of today may be worthwhile feeding through Simon into the media stratosphere so they get updated on that on a regular basis. And my question was just simply about wayfinding. I don't think we mentioned that. If you did, I missed it, sorry. Just as to, it says that we're going to be doing that early in 2019. I'm just questioning when we're about to start that because it's been a long time coming.
It is early, they said, so soon. General Manager.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I did receive an email from that, but I haven't read it, so I'll need to come back to you and take that on notice. So,
thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. I also rise to support the great work that's going on, but also to support item 2, the approval of the deferral of the 9 items. Obviously, as a council, we determined that those 9 things were equally as important at the beginning of the process, and there are some critical things that will still have to be deferred to the next financial year, and I do hope that we don't see ourselves in a similar situation when we're examining the next financial year's action plan review, because some of them, for example, parking, have been on the pipeline for a long time, and in some cases have had significant time and energy already expended against them. So I stand to support the great work that's happening. I stand to support the approval of the 9 items which we are deferring, but I do look forward to appropriately resourced plans being put before us for the next financial year so that some of those things that we've been waiting for a while can actually be achieved, and if need be we make some hard decisions and reduce the number of things that we say we're going to do. But yes, some great things happening right across the organisation.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Harris?
Yeah, just for the General Manager about the activation of the City Mall, if you can give us an update of where we're at with that in regard to food vans and perhaps any other activities that you might have on the go to help us reactivate that area.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. So obviously we've communicated to Council that we have ultimately been unsuccessful in being able to recruit a food van or food vans to provide the trial that we'd intended or outlined in the mall. So again, a media release will go out for that after this meeting, and then obviously the broader community can engage in that conversation. We are certainly looking at other ways and have been in terms of developing an ongoing program of activation in the mall, and obviously there's going to be more and more ideas that come forward as part of that. But I mean, as a start, for instance, one of the focus areas will be on leveraging the many events that we have in Launceston to have them use an opportunity to activate the mall to promote, prior to their events happening, to have some form of activity in the mall so that people are aware, number one, that the event's happening, and number two, hopefully attend that event. But for instance, tomorrow we've got a fashion parade, which is a prelude to the Launceston Cup. And we'll see that activated, and we want to see more and more of that occur into the future. We'll be working around public art. Obviously, Councillor Gibson's notice of motion here 4 or 5 months ago will be the basis for developing a public arts program, and that would see, my view would be public art rotating through the mall and spaces like that will have differing points of interest at different times of the year. So unfortunately the food van trial won't go ahead, but we certainly will continue to work in other ways to activate that mall to our greatest extent.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Harris, wish to close?
No, I think we've done it all.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and that is all councillors present. We'll close the meeting. Thank you very much. Just 10 minutes. That was over 10. Yeah, you did very well. That's all right. No, I don't mind. Yeah, you did well. But I think it's good for regularly to do it. Yeah. Time that comes out, just do it. I think so. Be prepared. But I mean, just my only problem is preaching to all of us that no, some have it. Yeah. No. Can they turn the on air off too?